So let me introduce this next session, Blue News, Casting a Wide Net, by taking a quick return to last year when we had the first Blue News panel of CHOW, where we looked at how current outlets within news media are covering ocean-related issues. I think in the run-up to this week, I got one question more than any other posed to me, and that is, what is a company like TripAdvisor doing on a panel relating to news and how news covers ocean issues? And I'm not going to answer that question, but that's exactly what you guys will hear in this next discussion, which looks at not just how traditional news media are covering things like the ocean, but how companies elsewhere are trying to make connections and indeed cast a wide net. To moderate the discussion is Barbara Cochran, president of the National Press Club Journalism Institute. She is also the Curtis B. Hurley Chair in Public Affairs Journalism at the Missouri School of Journalism and heads the program here in Washington. I can't resist, as I mention each time, the full bios are in the programs that you all have. But when I give you a sense of what Barbara's worked on over the course of her career, it's really it's iconography in everything we know about news and journalism. Barbara's held positions across public and commercial media, through print, radio, and TV, and a list of the shows that really define communications and news in today's world. At first at the Washington Star, then as vice president for news at NPR, she directed the creation of a show that I think we all consider the Bible of morning talk show, and that's Morning Edition. Moving into television, she was executive producer of NBC's Meet the Press, a show that many of us, again, turn to religiously every Sunday morning. And then she became vice president, Washington bureau chief at CBS News, the first woman to head a network bureau in Washington. And so it really is a great honor to have Barbara here to lead the discussion. She, in turn, will introduce the other panelists, equally distinguished, and then embark on a wonderful discussion. With that, I turn it to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that nice introduction. And we will answer that question that you posed so tantalizingly in just a few minutes. But the topic today is really an important one, and one that we're facing across a wide variety of issues, including oceans. We're really living in an age of media abundance and maybe even overload. We're bombarded every day with information from many different sources. We gravitate to trusted sources, and more the most trusted sources are our friends and family. But how can we be sure that the information we're getting is accurate and complete? And for those who want to bring more attention to a favorite cause or idea, how can that be accomplished? Especially if the topic is the oceans of our globe. We use the word ocean metaphorically to signify something that's vast and unknowable. Luckily, our two speakers today will enlighten us on how blue issues fit into our media landscape and how these topics can be brought more forcefully and accurately to a wider audience. First, I'd like to introduce Ann Thompson, Chief Environmental Affairs Correspondent for NBC News. I'm sure you recognize her from her extensive coverage of major environmental stories, including the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Ann has covered the environment beat since 2007, so 7 years. She joined NBC News 10 years before that and has covered politics and business and finance. All very good preparation for environmental issues. True. And now Maura Welch, the brand marketing director for TripAdvisor. Maura's worked with social media, gaming, and other digital platforms to promote brand awareness for a variety of companies, including Mobot, I hope I'm saying that right, Lycos, and Skygo. She's been a columnist and blogger for the Boston Globe, and she is the curator for the Boston area TEDx. So this session is meant to be interactive, and we want your questions. There are cards, I think, at your seats, and volunteers who will collect them and bring them here, and we'll try to incorporate as many of your questions as possible into the time we have together. And we also have our online audience, and so if you have questions for our panelists, please go ahead and send them in, and those will be brought forward also. So let's get started. And you've covered any number of stories about the oceans. Is there one that stands out, and can you tell us some of the challenges that you faced in covering that story?
Oh, I think for me, the story that really stands out when it comes to an issue about the oceans is the BP oil spill back in 2010. I was on that story. I lived in southern Louisiana for 5 months. The first month on a houseboat down in Venice, Louisiana, a little town of 400 people that grew to have about over 2,000 people when the National Guard and everybody came in to try to stop the oil spill. And then for the next 4 months, I lived on a fishing camp, and the country was absolutely galvanized by what had happened out in the Gulf of Mexico and the fact that we couldn't figure out how to stop it. And it was, part of it was the spill cam, which if you remember, we could watch underwater, watch all that oil flow out. And then a couple of weeks later, you could see the impact of all that oil as it came ashore. And then you could see it in Venice, Louisiana. Venice, Louisiana exists for no other reason but to provide a place for fishermen to go out and enjoy the bounty of the Gulf of Mexico. And it was completely shut down. And it wasn't just shut down for 3 months. I mean, they really wondered if they would ever get their livelihoods back. And slowly but surely, it has come back, although, the jury is still out on what kind of long-term impacts. But as I was saying to Barbara yesterday, I think one of the things that really struck me is, for as fascinated as we were for the 3 months before they actually stopped the well from gushing, and then it took them, I think, another month or 6 weeks to actually kill the well. Then all of a sudden we turned as a nation for an event that we paid so much attention to, and everybody knew what a top hat was, or a containment dome, or whatever was the latest idea to come up with how to stop it. All of a sudden we did a turn, and we've all gone on, and drilling has resumed. BP now has permission to drill in the Gulf of Mexico, and while there are some new safeguards, I mean, we learned as recently as last week, the Chemical Safety Board coming out and saying, look, the blowout preventer is still not fail-safe. They thought it would stop any kind of oil spill. It didn't on the Deepwater when the Deepwater Horizon blew up, and it still won't today. And yet we apparently, as a country, have decided this is an acceptable risk.
You told me that it's difficult when a story goes quiet like that to keep it before the public, but you're going to try to do that pretty soon.
I try to do that. I have great support from Brian Williams, who has a deep affection for Louisiana. We were down there for Hurricane Katrina, and then 5 years later we were back there for the oil spill. But it's a story that it moves in smaller increments, and there is fear there, but there is no oil that you can see, that kind of threat that people can instantly relate to. It's more about what they don't know, and what are the long-term impacts of the oil, of the dispersant, and questions that they aren't going to be answered tomorrow. It may be yet another 5 or 6 years before we have a real, true picture of the impact of that oil spill on the environment down there.
Right. Maura, when we were talking earlier, you told me that you live in Marblehead, so we know you have a personal interest in oceans. But tell us, why is TripAdvisor interested in oceans? What's the connection?
So TripAdvisor, we're home to the largest collection of authentic, unbiased traveler reviews, right? So we have, I think it's 100 reviews every minute happening on our site of people all over the world. 75% of our traffic is worldwide. So we're a real world community of people. And I can tell you that when you're aspiring to travel, what are the places that you think about? What are the kinds of locations that you dream about? They almost always have to do with oceans and beaches. And if you go on tripadvisor.com and you look at the image that we use imagery because we feel like it's a really important part of the travel aspiration experience. It's going to be a picture of a beach 9 times out of 10. And I heard that there was somebody from JetBlue who was talking about how oceans sell. I can tell you that if we put a cityscape up on the site versus an ocean or a beach shot, and the ocean or beach shot will win in terms of attention, clicks, etc. So why are we interested in oceans? We're interested in all of the happiness that people get when they go on a trip. So we like to say that we're in the happiness business. There's some people that say that, in fact, I think the New York Times had a story that said the 2 weeks leading up to your vacation are the happiest times in your vacation. So we love to be there because we're very much the place where you go as you're planning your trip. And then we're also the place that while you're on your trip, you're trying to figure out what's happening and find the best restaurants, the best locations to go. And then when you're back from your trip, what we find is that people really want to give back. They got great advice about where to go on their trips, and they want to pay it forward. So they come back and they review, and that's how we all get the great content. So it's just like basically creating content all the time, and a lot of it is about what are the best beaches, what is happening out there. We also have a really active travel forum, which many people don't know about on TripAdvisor, but it's a source of great information. And I went on there and looked up, the BP disaster, and you can sort of keyword search anything. And travelers are talking about this. They're concerned. So I would say that, that is a form of news. You get news from friends and family, and that's what reviews are all about.
Great. We were introducing the subject today by talking about the big competition for the time and attention of the audience. So tell a little bit about what your organizations, what you personally, in Anne's case, certainly are doing to try to engage the audience. And, I guess the question is, how do you get the attention of busy people? So, Anne.
Well, if you can answer that question, you can be a very wealthy woman, let me tell you. It's certainly something we're struggling with, in large part because we consume news differently, although I always thought you consumed a meal, but apparently you consume news. We consume news differently today than we did 20 years ago. You have your smartphone that gives you information. You have your tablet. You have your laptop. It's coming at you 24/7 from in all different forms. For us at NBC News, it's basically the question we ask ourselves every day is what impacts your life, and how how do we show you what that impact is, and what the consequences of that of whatever the issue, what those consequences could be. And so when it comes to covering oceans, we've done everything. Obviously, sea level rise is a big topic these days with the issue of climate change. Coastal erosion is another big issue. Overfishing is a subject that we have done. Clearly, the health of our oceans is a big issue, whether it's the Deepwater Horizon or it's ocean acidification. But the ocean is vast, and there is a lot we know, and yet there is so much we don't know. And then the other challenge for us is, when it comes to ocean issues, is how do I show it? Underwater photography is expensive, it's difficult, and you've got to find somebody who can do it. So that's one issue for us. But what I would say about that is, I think that when it comes to ocean issues, I would look at the advantages that you have. You have, the oceans are a source of food, and Lord knows we all love food, so that's instant interest. You have great charismatic characters in the ocean, both those that swim in the ocean and those above, both human and animal form. I mean, one of my favorite stories, I was out in Maine doing a piece on the puffins, and those are just fabulous birds that every school child knows about, but their whole life depends on the ocean, and they're watching their food source change. And so those are two things that will instantly gravitate people to the story. And in fact, when people travel to one of my favorite places in the world, the Great Barrier Reef, what's the number one draw for somebody going to the Great Barrier Reef? Finding Nemo. No joke. Of all the fish you could see, everybody wants to see the clownfish. They want to find Nemo.
So, Maura, what is TripAdvisor doing to engage the audience?
Engage the audience. Yeah, I think we're interested in, it's funny, as I'm thinking about how we behave with media now, when you're watching television, when I'm watching one of your stories, I'm probably using my mobile phone or my laptop, and I might be Googling, and I might be searching, and I might actually be sitting on TripAdvisor looking at that destination in the Great Barrier Reef or whatever it is that I'm interested in. So I think that, I think it's more than half of us are almost always using a second screen while we're looking at television. So one of the things that we do to break through is to be in both modes, right? We want to be both online and we want to be on the mobile device. So our goal is to make it super easy for you to find out the best information no matter where you are. So we make it highly searchable and really targeted. So our mobile app, if you're in the world right now and you click Near Me Now, will tell you where all the best destinations are around you. But I would also say that, that the more you connect those things, the more you discover even what people around you want. If you're connected through Facebook on TripAdvisor, you're going to know what your friends are also interested in doing. And I would say when the trust factor comes in on, how do we break through, it's like if my friend is telling me to pay attention to something, I'm more likely to pay attention to it. So I think that has something to do with it as well.
Good. I've gotten some questions already. They're all great questions, which I will get to, so keep them coming if you would like to. Speaking of the audience, I guess the question is how, from each of your perspectives, how is the audience changing? And what are you doing to attract new audiences? For television, the question is, how do you attract the younger viewers, and how do you get the viewers who maybe it's not a second screen, it's the first screen is their mobile device? And that is something we genuinely struggle with every day, is that we have, I don't think it's any surprise if you watch the commercials on NBC Nightly News, our audience skews older. They use a lot of drugs,
Yeah,
don't
they do use a lot of drugs. And I'm so thankful they do, because it pays my salary. No. So, the question is, how do you engage young people, in particular young men who don't necessarily tune in? So you look at issues. What are they talking about? What are they thinking about? What's on their minds? Yesterday we did a piece on World Cup fever. That's kind of a story that I would say is designed to attract a younger audience. We led with the upset of Eric Cantor in Virginia, which is obviously the big news of the day, but you have a story somewhere in there that brings people into the tent. I think environmental stories, in particular for women, I think are really interesting stories. Women truly care about the environment, because I think, and not that men don't, but for women, in particular mothers, it's sort of more something that they are constantly thinking about and become aware of through the eyes of their children. That's another way you do it. But they're constantly surveying people. What do they want to do? And what do they want? What are they interested? The question always is what is it? when you only have 22 minutes, and it's tough. Think about that. If you had to boil the world down to 22 minutes a night, there's some really difficult choices that get made and things that get left out because, in part, you want people to watch, so you put something in that will get them into the stable, if you will.
If they watch about the World Cup, maybe they'll sit through the story about machinations in Congress, which might not be so interesting to them.
A different version of the World Cup.
Right. And Maura, what's the target audience for TripAdvisor? Are there many targets?
There are many targets, but I think the sort of 30 and up traveler is a huge part of our audience. But I think a lot of people use it as a resource and come to us not necessarily. We actually have a tremendous amount of traffic that comes to us through search. So our audience is pretty diverse. But one of the things that we're doing to attract audiences is sort of this mode of be everywhere. And I think what we mean by that is sort of when you come on TripAdvisor and you're looking for what you're looking for, we want you to find all of the best destinations. But when you're out in the world traveling around, we also want you to know what are the best destinations. So we have programs, you might have seen some stickers on restaurants that are rated highly on TripAdvisor. We work with restaurants with a sticker program. We have a rewards program. We have Traveler's Choice Awards every year. We award the best beaches, the best destinations, and provide that kind of signage to these destinations. And so I think that in the perfect world, you would go anywhere in the real world and be able to see what was endorsed by TripAdvisor by other travelers like you. So that's one thing that we do to break through and pull people in, sort of always being top of mind as a resource.
One person, following up on the audience question, one person asked with the demographic diversity that we have here in the United States, how are you reaching out to Hispanics? The question mentions the Hmong community and other ethnic voters or viewers, I guess.
I mean, we, like I said, 75% of our traffic comes internationally. So we're translated into 29 languages. We've got a very global footprint and a very global approach. When we're posting traveler reviews, we make sure that the reviews are representative of the entire community. So I feel like we've got a pretty broad reach in terms of that.
Yeah, and we have what they call multiple platforms, lots of different channels. And with the Hispanic community, our channel is Telemundo, which is a Hispanic language network. And we have done some almost cross promotion with them. We'll have one of their anchors is now going to be on MSNBC. We are seeing the demographics of this country change, and it's important that we, as a news organization, reflect the demographics of what we are covering. And so you will see, I think, in the next few years, as the Hispanic population grows, you will see a greater Hispanic presence, not only on camera, but even more importantly, quite frankly, behind the camera, contributing to the ideas and the decisions that are made.
And still on the topic of audience, one of our audience asks, does MSNBC draw a different audience than nightly news?
Oh yes, it's a much different audience. It's smaller. I mean, nightly news, and in fact, this is true of the three network evening newscasts. They together, I think they get anywhere from 25 to 27 million viewers a night. We now, in the summer, our audience shrinks because, for some reason, our viewers really like to be outside, which is a good thing.
They're at the beach.
They are at the beach.
They're at the beach.
We have about anywhere from 8.5 to 9 million viewers a night during the summer. MSNBC, I think Rachel Maddow, which is the top show, might get 1 million viewers, and it's true of cable. Bill O'Reilly, I think, gets 2 million viewers, gets an awful lot of ink for those 2 million viewers. And so the amount of attention that is paid to them doesn't necessarily reflect the size of the audience.
Let's talk a little bit about credibility. I think we could all think of some examples of stories that were, mermaids comes to mind, that are presented as real, but they turn out to be, there's a disclaimer that says, oh, actually, we just made this up.
There's no mermaids?
So,
Pauline Jimmy Kimmel?
yes. I'd like to hear both of you talk a little bit about the importance of credibility and the kinds of steps that you take to verify that what you're reporting is accurate. And
In our case, and I think this is going to be true as technology continues to change the news business, because nowadays anybody can post and put anything online. The question is, what do you believe? Pat Moynihan said years ago, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but they're not entitled to their own facts. And just because you see it online doesn't mean that it's necessarily a fact. You have to go to the source and determine, is that source credible? And I think that for I guess you would call them legacy news organizations, I think that's where we can make a difference and distinguish ourselves, because ultimately that credibility is what will make a difference. It's why people trust you. When I do a story, I write what I report. It's very important to me, and I do most of the reporting as much physical reporting as I can do. But my stories go through editors, producers. They go into a file where everybody at NBC News can comment on it. And all that is done it's done that way in order to make sure the story is accurate, it is understandable, it makes sense, and people will contribute. And that's very important. And even after all that, you still can make a mistake. I mean, the reality is that you've got human beings doing this. And in some cases, you are only as good as your sources. And if your source is bad, you're going to end up putting something on the air that's wrong, and that's the worst day of your career. It's beyond horrible. It's not what anybody sets out to do. I don't believe there is anybody in this business who sets out, who's doing what I would call journalism, who's doing real reporting as opposed to spouting their opinion, but who's doing real reporting that is not devastated when they make a mistake. It's a really bad day.
Maura, TripAdvisor is dealing with reputations of millions of companies all over the world. Talk a little bit about the care that you have to take to make sure that things are accurate and how you deal with that.
Absolutely. I wish I could remember who said it, but information is plentiful, but trust and attention is scarce, which is what media organizations or TripAdvisor or anybody who wants to gain your trust as a source of good information is always working to be sort of gather your trust. Now, if you post a review on TripAdvisor, it doesn't go live right away. You'll get an email that says, thanks, we're going to be reviewing your review. I've actually written a review for TripAdvisor and had it denied because it sounded a little too salesy, I think. So I think what we're really after at TripAdvisor is authentic experiences. If it feels a little too trite, it probably won't get posted. It may not get posted, it may. But we do go through a review process with every review that comes in, and that's kind of a big job, right? We also have a fraud group that is looking at fraud all the time. So it's a continuous process. And
define what fraud would be in
fraud would be
context.
somebody who claims to that they had a very, very negative experience, and maybe it wasn't accurate what they were saying, and maybe an owner of a hotel or something would come forward and say, this feels like a fraudulent review to me.
And what about posters who aren't who they claim to be?
Well, our posters are individuals, and any individual can join TripAdvisor and post a review. So we leave it, you're definitely getting the wisdom of the crowds on TripAdvisor. We don't verify your identity. That's not something that we're in the business of doing. So when you read reviews, and it's interesting to talk to people who read reviews who are like, I'm reading through the reviews and I see the 15 reviews there, and I'm kind of weighing it. You're not taking it as gospel. You're understanding this is a group of people that have been there and that are trying to tell me what happened. So it's a little different than we're not reporting the facts. We've got individuals who have had these experiences who are giving you the benefit of their experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One of the pressures, of course, on credibility is the speeded up news cycle that we're dealing with now. And one of our audience members asked, how do we tell complex environmental stories in the 24-hour-a-day news cycle with the push to get something out first? And also asked, how can we help meeting people in the audience?
I think last week I did the National Climate Assessment that it came out. I'm thinking, I've got 1:40 to explain this to people. I mean, when you think about it, what an incredible challenge that is. I think, first of all, as a viewer, anytime you see breaking news, that the little flag should go off in your head saying, okay, if it really is a breaking news story, then what we first hear is may not be right. I mean, because it evolves and you get, one piece of information and you've checked it out, and then suddenly they say, no, it's going in another direction. So just as a viewer, that's something you should always be aware of. The key for me as I cover the environment is to find really good sources who can speak English, not science, but English. And as I always say, there's a great line from Denzel Washington in the movie Philadelphia. Explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old is what he says. And that's what I've totally stolen that line from him. Because I have a very diverse audience. Some of the viewers of NBC News, could run cartwheels around or do cartwheels around me when it comes to environmental issues. And some can't spell environment. So you've got this whole wide range of people out there who are watching you. So it's really important that I find people who can explain complicated subjects in a very accessible way. And so I am terribly dependent on people who work for organizations who know who are the best people within their organizations who can explain these issues. And one of the people here in the audience, Ben Sherman, is a great friend and does it just as well as anybody in the business. But he completely gets what I need to do. And that's what I need, is somebody who can not just explain it to me, but can explain it to our audience. And that's crucial.
Great. What about time pressures for TripAdvisors? Does the speed of communication, I mean, sometimes you'll have something get out there and it gets away from you?
Yeah, I actually think that we're built for handling that kind of speed because it's the platform that we've created just sort of allows the wave of things to happen. So if a particular place is becoming very popular and people are crowding into review, it's fine. I guess I would say, too, that as people come on and they're reviewing, I think we want them to feel like, okay, what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is that if you want to learn about the environment, one of the best ways to learn about the environment is to go to the place and actually experience it. And so what you're getting on TripAdvisor, clearly we're not a news organization, but I would say that there's a lot of interesting information to be found on TripAdvisor that is really relevant to the environment and relevant to these destinations. So I think that people are trying to, people that are actually out there looking for those beaches, looking for those ocean experiences are having some really profound experiences. I mean, when you learn best by doing. So anyway, I think that that's probably the piece that we contribute.
And the other thing is, I don't think it's all a bad thing that, we have this 24/7 pressure, and that we have different ways of disseminating information. During the BP oil spill, I started using Twitter, which was great. Facebook I'm not wild about, but Twitter I really like, because basically I could get out, here's what's happening, here's what's happening at the briefing that they did at 11 o'clock, and then they would do a briefing in the afternoon about the more technical points. I could get all that information out, and it's interactive, and you get information back, and that's wonderful. I'm trying to get as much information as I can so I can make the best decisions about what goes into a story. And you can use these tools to help develop sources, to help develop new sources of information. And I think it's really important. So it's a challenge on one hand, but there are some real good benefits on the other.
So if you tell us your Twitter handle, you'll get about 100 new followers. What is your Twitter handle?
It's Anne, A-N-N-E, NBC News. So.
Okay, there you have it. I mean, there's so many advantages, as you say, including internal communications. I mean, sometimes to get the word around to everybody inside the vast NBC complex, it's much more efficient to do it by Twitter, isn't it? So, again, just sort of related to credibility, and you touched on this, Anne, is the question of how to convey complex scientific information in a way that's understandable and that fits within the relatively short time frame that you have to deal with. And so some in our audience have asked some questions related to that. One asks about whether the state of science education influences both reporters. I mean, how did you learn the scientific information you need to know to do your job? And also the audience. Do you think there's even an anti-scientific, anti-scientific element in society today? Do you want to tackle that?
Well, let me start with how I learned about the environment. I mean, when I was given this beat, when I was asked to do this beat, truly, my family will absolutely roll over laughing at the idea that I was covering anything about the environment. Their remark was, "What, did Armani start making waiters?" Because and truly, the first time I ever went camping was on the Greenland ice sheet. So it's like this was not sort of a natural part of my life. What was a natural part of my life was the sea. I've spent some part of every summer of my life on Cape Cod. And so the sea is where I go to relax, it's where I go to recharge, it's where I go to both rest and invigorate myself. It is part of my spiritual and physical being, and so I absolutely love it. In fact, I'm happiest probably when I'm out on a boat, which was another reason why I love southern Louisiana so much, because I got to see a part of the world I never would have seen. I'm not a fisherman, I'm not a birder, I don't duck hunt, all those things that would take you down to the marshes of southern Louisiana. So is there an anti-science bias? I don't think so. I do find I am mystified by the vitriol that will come my way as an environmental reporter that never came my way when I covered politics or business or the economy. It is unbelievable that the nastiness with people especially who think that climate change is a big scam. The emails they're just head spinning in how nasty and angry they are. I don't have a good answer for that. Other than I think it's a difficult issue to understand, and it will threaten certain people's livelihoods. There's no question about it. And because if we do switch to a green economy, then certain fossil fuel jobs are going to go away. And I think when people don't see something to replace it that will give them the same kind of economic opportunity, it scares them. I don't think there's an anti-science bias. I think you just have to take time to explain it to people. I wasn't a science major, but I've learned, I read reports, I read books, I talk to people. When you you educate yourself. Anybody can do that. And it's crucial that we do it because there's no more important issue in our lives than the environment. It affects, the air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we drink, how we raise our families, where we can live, the jobs we can have, every aspect of our lives. There's no reason for anyone to be uneducated about the environment.
Maura, do you want to chime in on this in terms of what you see? I mean, is scientific validity something that's important for TripAdvisor?
Well, for one, I can just touch on some of the green initiative that we've been taking as a way to really move the hospitality industry in a more green direction. We launched a Green Leaders program where we will award hotels that take certain steps toward sustainability. And that has been a really interesting way. So as you're looking for hotels, you can make a choice to make a choice for a green hotel. That's a really important piece for us. We would like to build that into, and we were talking today about potentially building in ways that we can also encourage sustainable seafood, et cetera, in our restaurant listings. We're wide open to that kind of thing. I think travelers want to know if we had better information about making better choices in our daily life that would actually make an impact on the environment. I think people are open and ready for that. So we'd like to help with that.
Good. Another topic that's come up in some of the questions here has to do with how you keep attention on a subject once the disaster is over. Someone refers to it as disaster amnesia. We talked about that a little bit when you were talking about heading back down to do a story on the Gulf. Talk a little bit about that, about how you can try to counteract disaster amnesia.
And disaster fatigue. I mean,
Yeah.
people get tired of it, whether it's Katrina or Sandy. If it didn't happen in your neighborhood, after 4 or 5 days of coverage, you can get pretty wiped out on. You're like, let's go on to other things. And I think then the challenge becomes for us as journalists is, why do we keep going back to it? We keep going back to it because there's an impact, there's a reason, it's important there's something there that not only affects the lives of people in the area, but is either a cautionary tale for the rest of us or gives us some kind of information that will help us make better decisions. It's hard, it's very difficult, and I mean, it's like anything else. Look, reporters are human too. I mean, after you've been someplace for 3 weeks, you kind of want to go home. It may be 3 days and you kind of want to go home. But you get fascinated by what is it that's important. What struck me when I was down in Louisiana for the BP oil spill, I never wanted to leave. Because I knew how important that story was, and I didn't want to go home, and didn't a whole lot because of it, only when I absolutely had to. And I think that's, you're sort of driven by that, and it was a great frustration when you saw all of a sudden, once that well was killed, the country did a right turn and decided to pay attention to the economy. And it's like, but wait, there are still people down here who are without jobs and don't know if these jobs are coming back, and they're fighting with BP over the claims they're going to get, and that's still going on. And yet nobody seems very interested in that today. It's more of it then becomes a local story as opposed to a national story.
I mean, is it the news media alone that can keep attention focused on something like this?
No, I don't think. I think you can try, but and you pay a lot of attention. We did the long road home after Katrina, and we paid a lot of attention to the rebuilding of New Orleans and Mississippi, and there were some viewers who really didn't like that. Said, enough already. We want you to go away. Or want you to look at other things.
And these disasters affect the tourism industry in these places in an unbelievable way. And I know one of the things that I'm grateful for, being a fan of going to New Orleans and that amazing culture there, is that it was the people that went back after the event and wrote about their experiences and brought people back. So I think we can learn from each other as well, and if we're relying on each other for advice, I think as people travel to these places where there's been devastation, it comes back. It might not always be the same, but it's important to go out there and look at other sources to really understand what's happening out there.
And that leads to another audience question for Maura. Do you think consumers directly link their vacation experiences with the health of the ocean? Is this a conscious link, or is it?
You know, I think it was
Right.
interesting to hear you say how it feeds my soul. This is my place that I go for solace, and this is where I feel most centered. Yeah, I think people actually connect those experiences to the environment. If you know how beautiful Cape Cod is, and you know that there's been some sort of environmental threat there, you are really invested in making sure that that environment stays. So, no, I think people are quite interested in that. I also heard something on the JetBlue speaker, who I wish I had been here to meet the JetBlue speaker, said that everyone who goes to a beach is an eco traveler, an eco tourist. And that's true. I mean, we don't all have to be green in the top way, but if we go and support these places and go and visit in a sustainable way, we're helping, and we're also teaching our kids to do the same.
I take my nephew Drew is my little environmentalist, and we'll be walking along the beach, and he's picking up all the trash, and his father will turn to me and say thanks. But it's like, but I want him to care about this. It's very important that he cares, and I think absolutely. Remember, this was probably 20 years ago, and we had that spate of dirty beaches where, hypodermic syringes were showing up, and all kinds of junk was showing up on the beach. Look at what we've learned from the missing Malaysian Airlines jet.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that you wouldn't think, other than the ocean happens to be where we think it went down. Look at what we've learned about how much junk is in the Indian Ocean. All the false leads they've had, which is just trash. And people, think of it, and they don't realize it. Well, now they're more aware of it. And I think absolutely, if you are going on a beach vacation and you get there and the beach is dirty, the water is cloudy, whatever it is, that impacts everything.
And your vacation that you take once a year is one of the largest investments you make all year long. To take a family, or to even just go just for two people, it's a significant investment. People spend weeks and weeks planning, months, maybe 6 months, maybe a whole year thinking about it and going on TripAdvisor and comparing reviews and places. And it's actually the part of the joy is looking forward to it. There's a high level of expectation that when you arrive at that destination, that those places are as amazing as you thought. And I think people are actively, that is an environmental statement. People want to go there.
So, someone in the audience asked, does plastic pollution and marine debris get attention on TripAdvisor?
Yeah, there's actually, again, I would encourage you to go on the forums on TripAdvisor and do keyword searches on those topics. They are out there, and people are discussing them and sharing links back and forth about what's being done, news stories, et cetera. It's pretty amazing, but yes.
And, okay, let's move on here. Okay, here's one from our online audience. Our oceans are a public resource. They must both sustain productive fisheries and healthy ecosystems. So how do you look for that balance in the reporting that you do?
Well, one of the interesting issues is what's happening in Japan with Fukushima, which is the power plant or the nuclear power plant that was destroyed by the tsunami in the wake of the earthquake, and all the testing that goes on to measure the radiation in the waters there. Now, when we hear radiation in the water, it scares all of us, and it scares us because if you talk to scientists, we as a public, we don't understand radiation, so we hear that word and think the worst. I mean, there's radiation all around us. There's radiation in the banana you had. this morning on your cereal. You're exposed to radiation. I was exposed to radiation when I flew down this morning from New York and when I get back on the plane this afternoon. And one of the interesting issues with that is we have looked at, the levels of radiation in the ocean water, and Japan's levels are far more restrictive than ours, but still it's just that word. And one of my jobs is to educate people to understand that, what levels scientists say are acceptable and what aren't. But to get past that sort of built-in prejudice to that word is a hurdle.
People here, of course, have ideas that they would like to get across to the public, and we haven't really actively touched on that yet. What are some ideas for how someone with an idea to promote can get that across? What are the best ways to reach out to the public and special interest groups who are not involved and not well informed about ocean issues?
Well, one thing that we've been working on at TripAdvisor with NOAA and the Marine Sanctuaries Group is a partnership where we're hoping to help them to create better listings on TripAdvisor so that as people go around to various marine sanctuaries, they're going to get all the information they need and where are the visitor centers and locate all of that stuff. But we'd also like to just make sure that there's ways to connect them to a full experience that gives them more information about oceans and all of the different things in the area. So, we're working on various ideas around a partnership where we might do signage that helps to trigger a mobile message to you to help tip you off on other things you might enjoy as you go through your experience. So, I think it's interesting that people, when they're traveling, or people when you're in the world, the best way to get information is contextual, right? Where you are right now. So what can you do to get your message across to people that are right in the mode of where they are? I would say look for ways to do it in context and through mobile. People like that information at their fingertips, a few clicks away. So those kinds of partnerships with organizations that can help you get that bigger audience, I think, are really important.
And I'm sure you must get dozens and dozens of news releases, approaches every day from someone who wants you to tell their story. What advice do you have for them? What's going to catch your eye?
I think what catches my eye is how does it impact me, or think about it that way, or the viewer. And is that the kind of impact that should be on a national broadcast? I get a bizarre number of pitches. I'm like going, do you watch what we do? I don't know. But I think that you have, like I said, go back to, you have great charismatic creatures to tell the world about. You pitch me a story about dolphins, I can almost get that. I can almost guarantee I can get that on the air. We love dolphins. Love dolphins. We also like sharks. Maybe it's because we feel a certain camaraderie with them. I don't know, but it is any kind of charismatic fish. I'm sure if you have a story about clownfish, would be happy to do it because we can steal a clip from Finding Nemo. But that is, those are the things that will catch our eye. How does if it impacts the food we eat, the health of the water, any one of those creatures, it will be a story that will at least be considered. And yet, I will tell you, I had a brain fade. I had these story pitches that I was going to bring that I have yet to get a response about. But one of these stories, and it's a very important story, is that some researchers on the West Coast have found that because of ocean acidification, the shells of certain marine snails, really tiny creatures that are at the very base of the food web, are dissolving. And that could impact larger creatures, such as salmon, up on the food chain. And so my thought was, okay, and the research is being done out in Washington State. Well, my thought was, let's go to the Seattle Fish Market. We can shoot people buying the fish and show people, you like salmon, well, that's good. But if these marine snails go away, you could be in trouble. And they are being impacted by the fact that we are putting so much CO2 in the air. And that's what I mean by impact is, I have to show you how on your dinner plate, little marine snails that you've never heard of are the fact that their shells are becoming soft, how it will affect what you get on your dinner plate. That's the kind of connection. Connect it to make me care. That's what you're trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do as a journalist, and that's what I think you're trying to do as well.
Well, and that gets to the challenges that you face internally of pitching something to Nightly News, which is your best showcase for
Nightly
stories.
News or the Today Show. I mean, and you go back and forth, and truly, and I never know from moment to moment who's going to buy what. So it's you keep pitching and suggesting stories, and it all depends on the moment and what they're interested in and what else is going on in the world. Because again, you're competing for a finite period of time.
Right. You spoke about the 22 minutes, and everybody wants a piece of that, and of the dozens of correspondents there. Maura, we've had several questions here about the balance between tourism and environmental safety. I mean, there are some who think that the tourism business is a terrible environmental threat in and of itself. The cruise industry comes in for a lot of criticism on that score. How do you see it, and is there anything TripAdvisor does to address that?
Well, I think that is actually the reason why we founded the Green Leaders program, because we felt that, we have 260 million unique users coming to TripAdvisor every single month worldwide. So we can be a force for introducing measures that hopefully will improve the tourism industry, and that's what Green Leaders is really designed to do, which is encourage sustainability practices. And we are looking at ways to, potentially increase that program. We're moving it from just the United States to many, many countries. But yeah, I understand that it's definitely a balance. That said, I think tourism is the thing that I think it will grow. I think, and the other thing that will happen with tourism, I think, is it helps to connect us in a better way. I think the more people travel and the more people go from place to place, that's going to open minds. So, I don't think I think the solutions are going to be around how do we do it in a more sustainable way. But I think encouraging tourism is a good thing in general, for opening up the minds of people to what we need to do to help the environment.
And it's clear that bad news can make a story. How one of a person in our audience wants to know how do you sell environmental success stories?
Oh, I think those are actually easy to sell. One of the things that we like to do is, if there is a problem, then what's the solution to the problem? And if you have an environmental success story, I am all ears. I think that's a pretty easy story to sell.
Yeah. A couple of questions revolve around this idea again of balance. And one questioner says, if you have a debate on a news channel that balances a scientist with someone who's a critic of that particular scientific idea, does that put somebody in a bad position? Does it put the scientist in a bad position? I think what they're driving at is how do you get out of that need to have on the one hand, on the other hand, and really focus on what, in your estimation, is correct information?
Well, I think that a lot of times you can cover, or it's easy to cover the environment like you cover politics. Like you're doing both sides of the story. I mean, if you're going to have a scientific debate, then it needs to be scientists versus scientists, not scientists versus politician or scientist versus lobbyist or whatever. And I think it, and I can only speak for the way I report. I think we do, we've done a very conscious job of that. That we focus, when I cover the environment, I focus on the science. And if I explain the science well, then people can use that. I've hopefully educated the viewer enough in that minute 40 or 2 minutes that they can then use that story as a springboard to go look for other things. But I think you need to focus on, you need to understand that it's who you have and how you balance that. But my whole approach has always been to focus on the science.
You've talked about the green program, Maura, so that may be the answer to this question. Any proactive approaches? Do you have any proactive approaches to ocean sustainability or giving back to communities?
So proactively, I think we sometimes work with local DMOs, sort of direct marketing organizations that are in particular destinations to help them to explain to people the bounty that they have in their destination. So that is kind of an example of a proactive approach where we'll say, look, you have this whole area. What can we do to help you promote that area to travelers? So that's an example of something we do proactively. I think we're also open to ideas. And if there are folks out there that are trying to get important destinations or sustainability practices, et cetera, out there, I mean, we're quite, we have a lot of travelers who are interested in that type of information. So, especially if you have a destination that could live on TripAdvisor, whether if it's an attraction of some kind or a location, a sustainable seafood restaurant, et cetera, it should be spoken of in TripAdvisor. You'll have an audience of people who are actively looking for that information. So I'd encourage you to take those steps proactively with the tools as well.
Good. Looking here at my list, a little distracted looking at this. One person did ask whether the CHOW conference has provided any information or news that you're planning to follow up on this week. You've just arrived, so have you had a chance to look at anything?
I know, I
Okay.
I couldn't tell you, I could not give you even an answer.
But you have the packet, and
Yes.
something will strike you, and everybody's got your Twitter handle now. So
Send ideas,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
let's see. I guess. Maura. When you're looking at the audience, what kinds of metrics are you looking at? What kind of information do you look at that will help you to find new subjects or do new approaches?
Right. We have a whole ranking system on TripAdvisor for destinations, for hotels, for restaurants, attractions, et cetera. And we have a fairly robust Traveler's Choice program where we're always looking at the ranking and the sustained high reviews on particular properties, and then we'll pull that together and sort of come up with our top 10 lists of various destinations worldwide. And it's fascinating to watch how that changes over time. And which countries are people gravitating towards. So we use those metrics. We look really carefully at trends, and we do a lot of surveying of our users. It's quite incredible to have the size audience that we have. So we're actually able to put a lot of very interesting questions in front of them and get answers back. So you'll see us come out with news releases sometimes just talking about trends in travel or trends in what people are interested in finding out. So I think our audience is our best source of our data, and we're always watching sort of what they're saying. So it's less about, TripAdvisor doesn't actually rate anything. We allow all of you to rate that, and then we report back what that is.
Okay, good. And one of the challenges that you have now that you didn't have when your career began in local news is taking a story and repackaging it for different platforms. How do you approach that?
Well, we have, basically I write a story that airs on the Today Show or Nightly News. And then we have, depending on rights and clearances and pictures, if we've got permission to use certain pictures, it will go on the internet. The other thing that happens, and I think this is a real plus of now having multi-platforms, is that they will take an interview I did that you may only see 15 seconds of in a story, and they will cut down, and those interviews go 20, 30 minutes, and they will cut that interview down to maybe 3 minutes or 4 minutes, and you can see more, you can learn more. I don't do a lot of the repackaging myself, but there are producers who do it. And I think that's all great. I mean, the more information that's out there for people, the more they can make up their own minds about a subject, and it's that hopefully we spark their interest, and then they will go on to either the Today Show website or Nightly News. But I think that's one of the great things about how technology has changed, because we do so much work. I mean, when I do a story, hopefully it'll be a minute 50 or 2 minutes or a minute 30 on the show, and then but I always prepare, like, if Brian got sick, I could stand there and talk for a half hour. I could fill those 22 minutes. So there's all this work that goes in that never sees the light of a TV screen. And now having a digital platform has now enabled us to do it. I mean, you saw this a couple of weeks ago when Brian interviewed Edward Snowden. You could go online and watch the whole thing yourself and, decide for yourself. It's a wonderful tool.
Good. I think we're coming to the end of our time here together, so let's be a little forward looking. Maura, what are the trends that you might see in the travel business and for TripAdvisor, and for how you're going to grow the TripAdvisor community?
Right. I think that there's a number of things that we're focused on now. More personalization. So as you come on TripAdvisor, the idea is if you've identified your interests by browsing, we'll probably be able to offer you better and better opportunities to learn about new places. So we're really focused on personalization. And sort of piggybacking on what you said about moving that media around to different sources, we're super focused on making sure that information is available in multiple languages. We're launching about 5 more languages this year. I think it's really important for all of this amazing information that everybody is creating that anyone, anywhere can read that information no matter where they are. So we're really focused on broadening our footprint and also encouraging local folks. If you are in Russia and you're reviewing your local places, it's incredibly interesting to read a Russian review of a Russian location than it is to read an American who went to Russia and talked about it. So we're very interested in foreign language reviews and encouraging that piece. I think we'd like to also do a deeper dive. I don't know how much you guys, we're interested in restaurants and really distinguishing our restaurant service this year. So if you have ideas, we'd love to hear them about how we can improve our restaurants listings, because what I took away from this conference so far is I think there might be an opportunity to do something with sustainable fisheries, or sustainable practices. So those are just some examples.
Good. And you mentioned in the beginning some of the stories, the big stories that are that you'll be watching, but here's a chance to go into a little more depth on some of those issues, like ocean acidification, sustainable fisheries, that kind of thing. I felt in preparing for this conference, or for this panel today, I suddenly, oceans were in every single thing I was learning about, including I was judging an awards contest, and one of the entries was a really interesting NPR series on how the sustainable seafood designation is awarded, and the more you looked into it, the more questions you had about it. So, I felt like information about oceans was everywhere, but what are some of the things that you'll be following?
I think that for us, what we are seeing now is that we are living climate change in real time. And in particular, when it comes to the issues of the ocean, I think that coastal erosion and sea level rise are, to me, the two big issues that we are dealing with. And whether that is because of a storm like Sandy, where you have this huge storm surge that brings the ocean to places where the ocean wants to go. We don't want it to go, but the ocean wants what it's going to take. Or you have nor'easters that have sat over Cape Cod in March and February of 2013, and took away parts of Wellfleet and parts of Nantucket. And again, Mother Nature doesn't care how much money you have or what your vacation plans are. It's going to take what it's going to take. And it's all things that we have to really think about. Where we like to vacation, where we like to live, where we may not be the best place. We may have to start thinking again about how we live with the ocean and how we live along it and how we do it in a way that is good for us and good for the ocean. And those are some real serious discussions that I think we have to have given the age that we're in.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank both of you so much. This has been really informative and very enlightening. And thank you to the audience for your great questions. And let's give a round of applause to our two.
So I'd like to thank the panelists for a wonderful discussion and close with an observation that ties together just one overriding thought, one central thought that's been expressed by a number of panelists. And it's this connection, this really visceral and spiritual and instinctive connection that humans have to the sea. We heard it with John Podesta in the opening keynote when he quoted President Kennedy. We heard it from Secretary of the Interior Sally Jewell when she spoke yesterday. We heard it from Ann just now, and it really has permeated the conference and really is one of the messages we should take away with us.